Imagine if you could take one of your favourite garden plants and turn it for pretty much free into a whole load more. Imagine how that would transform your garden. You wouldn't have any bare ground. Your garden would be full of flowering plants that not only look beautiful, but support a whole load of different wildlife species. And your bank balance, that would be a whole load higher too. Now there are 3 main ways to grow plants from scratch, and they're all fairly straightforward if you know how. There's division, where we literally cut a plant into multiple pieces. That's a bread knife I've got in my hand. Seed sowing, where we collect seed from the garden, or buy it, and sow it. And the one that I'm going to show you in this video, which is taking cuttings, perfect for spring and summer. Now taking cuttings is where we cut pieces of stem from the existing plants and treat them in a way which encourages them to grow roots and form completely new plants, which is pretty damn impressive. So let's get started. First of all, you might be wondering which plants will grow well from cuttings, and the answer is that lots of plants can be grown from cuttings, but not all. And sometimes you don't know which plants will do well until you've given it a go. But to give you some guidance, don't bother with ornamental grasses, these need to be divided. And don't bother with anything that's either flowering or about to flower, because if it's in the mood for flowering, it's not in the mood for rooting, so don't bother with it. Other than that, look for healthy plants with fresh growth that's at least 5 centimeters long, and give it a go. The worst that can happen is that the plant won't root, and if that does happen, you can always try again at a different time of the year, or try a different method of propagation, like seed sowing or division. There are 4 easy steps that you need to follow, and the first one is to actually take the cuttings from the plant. We're going to take more material than we need. Our final cuttings will be somewhere between 5 and 15 centimeters long, so let's go for material that's longer than that if possible, and only take young green growth. We don't want any woody stems for this type of cutting. And by the way, all plants are different, and when I say 5 to 15 centimeters, that might seem a bit vague, but don't worry too much about it, it's going to be absolutely fine. In case you're wondering what plants I'm growing here, these big fleshy ones are Sedum spectabile. These really small ones are Calamintha nepeta, white cloud. And these ones are Nepeta racemosa, walker's low. And if all of those names sound a bit like gobbledygook to you, don't worry too much, don't feel intimidated, because I've got a free course on understanding and using botanical plant names coming out in the next few weeks. And if you head over to gardeningmentor.co.uk and join my email list, I'll tell you about this free course when it's ready for you, so do that. And back to the cuttings. The next step is to trim them to size and push them into the compost. You'll need a good quality peat-free compost for this, otherwise the cuttings won't root. The only one that's widely available here in the UK that I'm happy to recommend is this one, Melcourt Silvergrow Multipurpose. It's not the cheapest compost, but each bag is big enough to grow between 50 and 300 plants, depending on what size you plant them out at. That's between 3p and 25p per plant, which is less than 2% of the price of the plants if you bought them from a garden centre, which I think is really cheap. Fill small pots or module trays as high as possible, tap them on the table to firm the compost without compacting it, brush off the excess compost, and give them a water with a watering can with a rose attachment. This will stop the compost from washing away. So the ideal length for most cuttings is around 10 centimeters. That's what we're aiming for on average. But these Calamintha weren't that long to begin with, so they might end up being closer to 5 centimeters when they're finished, which is absolutely fine. With some sharp scissors, we want to make a cut just below a pair of leaves, like this. This node, where the leaves are growing from, is where the new roots are going to grow from. Roots will never grow from this section of stem between the nodes, known as the internode. And if we leave too much of the internode on the cutting, it could rot, and this rot could spread to the rest of the cutting, which would be bad. At the same time, we don't want to cut so close to the node that we damage it. So my advice is this: find the node and cut 2 to 3 millimeters below it. Once your cuttings are the right length, we need to remove a few of the lower leaves. This will reduce the amount of water that the cuttings lose, which is important because they haven't got any roots right now, and their ability to take up water is hindered. And perhaps most importantly, it enables us to push the cutting into the compost. At the same time, it's important to leave some leaves on the cuttings because these are the solar panels. These leaves photosynthesize and give the plant the energy it needs to grow new roots. With experience, you'll get to know how many leaves to leave and how many to leave on. As a rough guide, I would recommend removing leaves from the bottom half of the cutting using sharp scissors, trying not to damage the stem when you do this. Your cuttings are now ready, so being very careful not to snap them, get the cuttings and push them into the compost that you prepared earlier. You can either do one per module, like this, or you can put a few in a pot, like this. Label your cuttings with the name and date. That's the plant name, not your own. And we're ready to move on to step 3. This is the rooting phase, and depending on your propagation environment and the type of plant that you're propagating, this could take anywhere between, say, 1 week and 2 months. The ideal environment for cuttings is warm, but not too warm. This keeps the plants growing actively. 20 to 25 degrees Celsius is ideal. It gets bright light for as much of the day as possible, which fuels the fresh growth through photosynthesis. And it's humid, which prevents the cuttings losing too much moisture and wilting. But just as important as all of these is consistency. We don't want direct sunlight because it could get way too hot, and as soon as the sun goes behind a cloud, the temperature will drop rapidly, and the plant will have to waste energy trying to keep up with all of these environmental changes. So I find that a north-facing windowsill works very well because it gets consistent, indirect sunlight all day. I mean, ideally, we'd like more light than that, but we want consistency, so for that reason, a north-facing windowsill is much better than a south-facing windowsill. If you have a heat mat, this will speed things up dramatically, keeping your plants at around 20 to 25 degrees Celsius. And you'll need some sort of cover that keeps the humidity in to stop your cuttings from losing too much water and wilting. Or you could put a sandwich bag over individual pots. Because I take a lot of cuttings, I made a really good home propagation environment using a heat mat, a grow light, a plastic cover, and a shelf. The whole setup costs around £120, but it enables us to grow thousands of pounds worth of plants each year, so it's worth it. And perhaps I'll make a video on this in the future showing you how you can make your own propagation environment like this in your own home. One more thing, a recycled water spritzer. One more thing, a recycled water spritzer is really helpful for trying to keep the humidity up in the propagation environment before your cuttings have rooted. I usually spritz around 2 to 3 times a day in my heated propagator, but if you're on an unheated windowsill, you probably don't need to do this. Okay, final step, potting up. With any luck, after a few weeks your cuttings will have rooted. Signs that they have rooted include fresh growth on top, and most importantly, roots growing out the bottom of the pot. When they're at this stage, it can be a good idea to leave them in the pot for a week or 2 longer with the lid off. They don't need the propagator lid on anymore because by now they've got roots, so hopefully they won't wilt. We don't want to leave the lid on longer than what we need to because all that extra humidity, although it's good in the propagation stage, when the plants are going, it could cause them to rot and that would be bad. And this extra time in the pot will help the root system to fill out a little and make it more tolerant of any damage that we might accidentally cause when potting up. And it will give the cuttings a chance to adjust to the much lower humidity of the outside world. At this stage, it's usually a good idea to cut your rooted cuttings back to just above a node. This encourages side growth, so you end up with a much bushier, more robust plant. So to pot these rooted cuttings up, we need to remove them from the pot. Look at all those lovely roots. We need to tease them apart from each other, trying to cause as little damage as possible. And into the pots they go. Put a bit of compost in the bottom of the pot. The cutting goes in, more compost, one quick firm, a tap, a water, and we're done. These plants can now be grown on either outside if no frost is expected, or in a greenhouse if you have one, until they've filled the pot with roots, or until you're ready to plant them out in your garden. And that's it. That's cuttings. Simple. Go and make as many plants as you can and fill your garden with them, or give them to friends and family, or sell them. The choice is yours. Okay, I hope you've really enjoyed this video. I hope you've found it helpful. If you have, and if you did, please please subscribe and like the video and leave a comment, because that's always nice. It's nice to have comments. Please do it. What else do I need to say? Yeah. Head over to gardeningmentor.co.uk, join the email list so you can learn to turn your garden from this into something more like this. Pretty impressive, I know. Okay, I hope you really enjoyed this. I'll see you next time. Until then, happy gardening. Bye.
Joey, have you seen the bread knife?
It's in the wheelbarrow.
What?
Yeah, sorry.
Oh.